Right now, your mind may be trapped in a relentless, silent rehearsal of tomorrow, checking and rechecking the lists of things that haven't even happened yet. Perhaps you are lying here, pulling the soft weight of your blanket up toward your chin, feeling that familiar tight constriction in your chest, a sensation like standing on the edge of a deep, dark gorge, staring down at the path you believe you must build before you can ever dare to cross it. The room is quiet, the dim light casting long, gentle shadows against the wall, but inside you there is the persistent, low-frequency hum of someone who is afraid that if they stop measuring the distance, the bridge will simply never exist. You feel the heavy, familiar pressure of, "If I don't prepare for everything, I am failing," the quiet, gnawing anxiety that your safety is entirely dependent on the perfection of your future plans. It is a lonely way to carry the evening into the night, feeling as though your worth is tethered to a structure you are constantly reinforcing, yet never actually stepping foot upon. The room around you is a sanctuary, draped in the soft, velvet quiet of the late hour. A faint, silver glow of moonlight rests on the edge of your bedside, while the cool night air outside breathes against the window pane with a steady, unhurried rhythm. The house is still, the distant, muffled sounds of the world have long since faded into a hum, and your pillow is here, waiting to cradle your head. Your body is ready for this, even if your mind is still caught in the frantic momentum of the builder. There is no need for you to be anything other than exactly who you are in this moment. The lists, the mental reinforcements, the constant internal mapping of potential dangers, they can all rest outside this room. You are safe enough to soften. You are safe enough to let your jaw release, to let your shoulders drop away from your ears, and to finally, just for a few hours, stop trying to inspect the planks of a future that has not arrived. You are not broken for feeling this need to prepare. What you are experiencing is not a failure of character or a lack of trust. It is simply the natural, aching result of a person who has spent a lifetime believing that their peace is something that must be engineered, fortified, and guarded against the chaos of change. We are taught that to honor our life is to keep the bridge perfectly sturdy, to keep the measurements exact, to keep building until we are so exhausted we can no longer feel the ground beneath our own feet. But tonight, we will not force the mind to be silent. For a mind that is afraid of the chasm does not need to be disciplined, it needs to be understood. We will not try to defeat your planning, and we will not try to pretend your desire to avoid tragedy doesn't matter. We will learn how to look at the bridge you are building and recognize that the strength to cross the chasm was never dependent on the blueprints you have been clutching so tightly. The paradox, dear friend, is that the more you obsess over the strength of the bridge to protect yourself from uncertainty, the more you remain stuck on the edge of the chasm, never actually crossing into the life you are working so hard to safeguard. Peace does not come from having a flawless plan. Peace comes when you realize that the bridge is a construct of your own mind, and that your ability to walk through life remains entirely intact even when the path is not fully paved. Maybe you have felt this, too, that secret, sinking sensation when you have a plan that fails, or when life brings a surprise that no amount of preparation could have predicted, and you immediately feel the heavy, jagged collapse of your own sense of safety. It is a heavy burden, living your life in anticipation of being stranded. But what if the uncertainty you are so afraid of is actually the only version of your life that is truly open? What if your safety is not something that needs to be engineered in a ledger of what-ifs, but is instead something that can simply exist, right here, in the middle of the bridge, unburdened by your need to finish the construction? You do not have to solve your whole life tonight. You do not have to decide how to prevent every catastrophe, or how to secure every outcome, or how to ensure you are never caught off guard. For now, there is only the sensation of your own breath, moving in and out like a slow, steady pulse. If it feels right, notice where you are holding tension in your chest. Perhaps it is the tightness of a heart that is afraid of falling. See if you can invite that place to let go, just an inch. You are not losing your future by relaxing. You are simply allowing your spirit to recover from the long labor of maintaining an imaginary fortress. There is a profound, quiet safety in this permission to stop building the bridge for a few hours. You are finally in a space where no one is asking for your design, and no one is waiting for you to prove your resilience. In this stillness, we are going to walk toward a clearer understanding of why the need to prevent everything feels so all-consuming, and how we might begin to step onto the bridge, plank by plank, without feeling like we are walking into a disaster. It is not about becoming reckless, it is about finally allowing the reality of your own existence to be lived, even by you, in its raw, unfolding state. In a moment, we will step into the story of an architect who was tasked with building a bridge across a treacherous, mist-covered gorge, who spent his entire youth selecting the perfect stones and refusing to cross until he was certain they could withstand a mountain's fury. And we will see what happened when a hermit asked him a single, devastating question about who the bridge was actually for. But for now, just breathe. Notice the texture of the fabric against your skin. Notice the rhythm of the air moving in through your nostrils and out again, cool and steady. You have arrived here, and that is the only task that has been required of you. Everything else can wait for the light of a new day. Your responsibility tonight is only to the quiet that is gathering in the corners of this room and the soft, steady rhythm of your own heart. You are held here in this space of rest, and you have nowhere else you need to be. Deep in the heart of a province defined by its jagged, unforgiving terrain, there lived an architect named Elias. He had earned his reputation not by the height of his towers, but by the extraordinary strength of the bridges he built. People from across the mountain range sought him out, begging him to span the most treacherous gorges and deepest mist-shrouded chasms. They wanted safety. They wanted certainty. They wanted to know that if they stepped onto a bridge built by Elias, they would reach the other side, no matter how hard the mountain winds blew or how much the earth trembled. Elias was a man who lived his life in a state of perpetual, high-alert preparation. His workspace was a cavernous, stone-walled room where he spent his days hunched over complex diagrams, calculating the stress points of every plank and the tension of every iron rivet. He was haunted by the fear of a bridge failing under someone's feet. He envisioned the collapse, the sudden snap of wood, the long, terrifying fall. To prevent this, he built with an obsession that consumed his entire existence. He would test every stone 3 times. He would double the supports. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, mentally walking across every bridge he had ever designed, looking for the one hidden structural weakness that might lead to disaster. He was a master, yet he lived as a prisoner of his own proficiency. Because he was so preoccupied with the potential for tragedy, he never actually experienced the joy of traversing his own creations. He remained on the edge of the chasm, forever inspecting, forever reinforcing, forever planning for a catastrophe that he could not fully convince himself would never arrive. One autumn afternoon, a season when the mountain mists grew thick and cold, an elderly hermit named Osha appeared at the entrance of the workroom. Osha did not carry a staff or a satchel. He walked with the lightness of someone who owned nothing. He watched Elias for a long time, observing the way the architect's hands trembled as he tightened a measuring line, the way his eyes remained fixed on the plans rather than the light filtering through the high window. Elias did not notice him until he felt the coolness of a shadow falling across his table. He looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "I am in the middle of a vital calculation," Elias said, his voice clipped and dry. "This bridge will be the strongest one yet. It is built to withstand an earthquake, Osha looked at the bridge diagram, then at the heavy, smooth stone Elias was using as a paperweight on his desk. It was a beautiful, rounded grey stone, cool to the touch and perfectly balanced. Osha picked up the stone, feeling its weight, and placed it right in the center of the diagram. "If you are so worried about the bridge falling," Osha asked, his voice soft, "why are you not walking across it?" Elias frowned. "I am the architect. My task is to ensure the bridge is safe. Once it is finished, I will know it is ready." Osha smiled, a slow, quiet expression that seemed to crinkle the very air around them. "You have built bridges across every gorge in this province, Elias. Yet I have watched you for years. You stand on the edge, you inspect every plank, you look for the cracks, but you never take the first step to the other side." Elias felt a sudden sharp ache in his chest. It was a feeling of profound exposure. He looked at the bridge on the paper, then at the smooth stone Osha had placed on the diagram. "If I step onto it," Elias whispered, "I have to trust that the bridge will hold, and if I am wrong, everything is lost." Osha leaned in, his eyes bright with a strange, clear kindness. "You have spent your entire life preparing for the walk, but you have forgotten that the bridge was never meant to be a permanent solution to the uncertainty of the mountain. It was only meant to be a way to move through your life. You are so busy building a fortress against the future that you have forgotten to inhabit your present." Osha pointed to the stone on the table. "You carry this weight of potential failure everywhere you go," he said. "You hold it as if it were a guide, but it is just a heavy stone that keeps you rooted to the edge of the chasm. What would happen if you simply walked, not because you were certain of the bridge, but because you were certain your own capacity to walk?" Elias looked at his own hands, calloused and mapped with the ink of 1,000 designs. He realized he was exhausted. He was tired of the blueprints. He was tired of the mental rehearsals of collapse. For the first time, he didn't look at the stone as a necessity for his safety. He looked at it as the very thing that was preventing him from moving. He reached out and pushed the stone aside. He stood up, his legs feeling stiff from years of sitting at the drafting table. He walked toward the door of the workroom, his steps slow and tentative. He walked out onto the stone ledge overlooking the great gorge. The wind was whipping the mist into a frenzy, and the bridge he had designed stretched out before him, a slender, dark ribbon against the vastness of the abyss. He didn't check the rivets. He didn't inspect the planks. He simply stood at the threshold of the crossing. He felt the terrifying, wide-open space beneath his feet, and for a moment his old fear flared up the urge to run back to the desk, to check the calculations, to stay safe in the planning. But then he remembered the hermit's question. "If you never cross, for whom did you build the bridge?" Elias took one single conscious breath. He felt the air move through his lungs, cool and grounding. He didn't need to know the bridge would hold for 100 years. He only needed to know that he was capable of taking one step. He moved his foot forward, the wood creaking beneath his weight, the wind pulling at his robes, and he felt the reality of the crossing. It was not a perfect, sterile experience. It was messy, it was loud, and it was alive. He realized that by building such a heavy, impenetrable shield against his fear of tragedy, he had only succeeded in separating himself from the beauty of the journey. He had been so obsessed with the what-if that he had missed the is, and as he walked, his breathing became a natural rhythm that matched the movement of his legs, a steady, unforced cadence that belonged to the mountain itself. He was no longer the architect of a future catastrophe. He was the traveler of his own present life. And perhaps this is where the teaching begins to touch your own heart. For you are the architect of your own unseen bridges, carrying the heavy stones of your fears into every room you enter. You walk through your day inspecting the planks, checking the rivets, and wondering when the ground will give way. You treat your life as a series of dangers to be managed rather than a gorge to be crossed. But the strength you are looking for The strength to meet whatever happens tomorrow is not something you build with more planning. It is something you find by finally walking across the bridge you have already built, step by step, breath by breath, trusting that you are enough to meet the reality of the moment as it unfolds. You have built so much in your mind, but you have forgotten to live. And tonight, in the quiet of this room, you have the permission to finally put down the blueprints and just be the one who is walking. The lesson revealed on that mist-covered ridge, where Elias finally stood at the threshold of the crossing, is not a call to abandon the structures of your life or to stop caring about the integrity of your work. It is not an invitation to become indifferent, nor is it a mandate to walk through your days as if the potential for collapse does not exist. The hermit, Osha, did not tell the architect that his skill was meaningless or that his desire to build strong, lasting things was a mistake. He was pointing towards something much quieter, the vast yawning difference between being a traveler who moves through life with presence and being a prisoner who spends their entire journey inspecting the planks of a bridge they are too afraid to actually walk upon. The suffering in Elias' life was not found in the iron rivets, nor the heavy stones, nor even in the sincere human wish to create safety in a world that is inherently unpredictable. The suffering was found in the way he held his existence, using the potential for tragedy as a standard that he felt he had to constantly satisfy, even at the cost of his own ability to inhabit the present moment. When we feel that we must endlessly reinforce the defenses of our future, anticipating every disaster, rehearsing every conversation, and triple-checking the strength of our plans just to feel a momentary sense of safety, we are doing exactly what Elias did in his stone-walled room. We are spending our nights and our weekends obsessively reviewing the diagrams of our lives, convinced that if we only build a thick enough wall or construct a strong enough plan, we will finally be shielded from the sting of surprise. We believe that if we stop monitoring the structural integrity of our future, we will be vulnerable to catastrophe, or worse, we will be exposed as unprepared. But this is the exhausting, silent burden that drains the spirit of its vitality. It is the effort of maintaining the vigilance, the constant, low-frequency scanning for threats that may never manifest, that causes the chronic heavy ache you feel in the quiet hours of the night. It is the feeling that you are never truly present in your own skin, because you are always living in a future scenario that you are frantically trying to control. Buddhist wisdom often speaks of this as the trap of trying to engineer your peace through objects or outcomes that are essentially fluid. We take our plans, our expectations, and the carefully constructed images of who we are supposed to be, and we try to make them permanent, because we are terrified of the space that remains when the planning stops. But life, like the mist moving across that mountain gorge, is always shifting. It is always asking us to be present with the next degree of reality, the next step on the path, the next breath of air. When we try to fix ourselves in a rigid shape by obsessing over the future, we are not becoming more secure, we are becoming brittle. We are exhausting the very heart that is meant to navigate the journey, regardless of whether the bridge is perfectly smooth or whether the path is winding and steep. The first wound, the one Elias felt the fear of the snap of wood, the stinging recognition that life can change in an instant, the natural aching fatigue of a person who has spent their life anticipating loss, is a part of the human experience. It is the natural friction of trying to hold on to a sense of stability in a world that, by its very nature, is always moving. But the second wound, the one that made his life a struggle, was the judgment he added to that first fear. He told himself that his life was only acceptable if he could guarantee the outcome. He told himself that he was failing because he couldn't force reality to follow his blueprints. He added a layer of shame to the original, honest human desire for safety, and that shame became the very weight that prevented him from crossing the chasm. One of the great insights of the Buddha is that we cannot always control the first pain, that life brings the surprise, the setback, the inevitable moments where things do not align with our expectations, but we have a profound, quiet power over the second pain. We can learn to stop feeding the fear. We can learn to stop using our own humanity as a reason to turn against ourselves. Think about the way you treat the parts of your life that feel uncertain. When you lie awake at night and your mind begins to list all the things that could go wrong tomorrow, or when you feel that hollow, sinking fear at the thought of a plan falling through, what is your initial reaction? Often, it is to tighten your grip. You try to analyze why you can't be more certain, why you can't be more prepared, or why you can't find a way to eliminate the risk altogether. This resistance, this internal attempt to fortify your life against the natural flow of change, is the second wound. It is the act of trying to rebuild the bridge while you are already standing in the middle of the gorge. What if, instead, you could simply notice the anxiety, acknowledge the human need for safety, and let it be as it is, without demanding that it prove your capacity to survive? This is not a surrender to despair. It is a profound reclamation of your own strength. When Osha sat with Elias in the mist and reminded him that the bridge was meant to be walked upon, he was not dismantling the architect's skill. He was reminding him that his purpose was to live, not just to prepare for living. You do not need to be a fortress, and you do not need to guarantee the future to be worthy of peace. You can be like a traveler who walks with empty hands, observant, present, and entirely capable of meeting the path as it appears, without needing to own the terrain ahead. In a moment, we will look at how to bring this realization into the quiet of your own body, without forcing any grand transformation. For now, just consider that you have been standing on the edge of your life for a long time, meticulously checking for cracks. And you are tired. That tiredness is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a signal from your heart that it is time to stop the constant maintenance of an anticipation that no longer serves you. It is a request for you to come home to yourself, not as the planner of the perfect outcome, but as the person you are, here and now, in the stillness of this night. You have been holding your breath, waiting for the world to finally confirm that it is safe, waiting for the day when the bridge will feel indestructible. But what if you were already strong enough to meet whatever comes, and the struggle was only ever a way to hide from the beauty of the journey? It is enough to feel the weight of your own existence. It is enough to notice that you are weary and to simply acknowledge it without adding the label of being unprepared. You are lying in the dark, you are breathing, and the world is moving on its own terms. You do not need to oversee it. You do not need to forecast the storms. You can let the future recede into the distance, not to lose who you are, but to reveal the steadiness that has been waiting under the tangle of your own mental lists all along. There is a deep, resonant peace in the realization that you were never the one who had to hold the mountain together for the path to exist. You were the one standing on the ledge, and you were the one who had the power to stop building and start walking whenever you felt the weight of the blueprints became too heavy to bear. And perhaps this is where the teaching begins to touch your own heart. For you are the architect of your own unseen bridges, carrying the heavy stones of your fears into every room you enter. You walk through your day inspecting the planks, checking the rivets, and wondering when the ground will give way. You treat your life as a series of dangers to be managed, rather than a gorge to be crossed. But the strength you are looking for, the strength to meet whatever happens tomorrow, is not something you build with more planning. It is something you find by finally walking across the bridge you have already built. Step by step, breath by breath, trusting that you are enough to meet the reality of the moment as it unfolds. You have built so much in your mind, but you have forgotten to live. And tonight, in the quiet of this room, you have the permission to finally put down the blueprints and just be the one who is walking. If you are lying there, feeling the weight of the blueprints you have been carrying through the long halls of your mind, allow your body to sink deeper into the comfort of the blankets. Feel the places where you are being supported, the curve of your neck, the breadth of your shoulders, the heels of your feet, and imagine that, just like the smooth, heavy stone Elias moved from his desk, your own frame is becoming heavy, not with the burden of anticipating the future, but with the quiet, grounding pull of the earth. You do not need to do anything to earn this rest. You do not need to be any version of yourself other than the one that is here, breathing in the dark, safe and hidden away from the world's constant demand for you to secure your own survival. If it feels right, bring your attention to the rhythm of your own breath. You don't have to change it or deepen it or make it follow a specific count. Just notice it. Notice how the air enters your nostrils, cool and thin, and how it leaves, just a little warmer, carrying with it the remnants of the frantic planning you felt today. As you breathe, perhaps you can visualize that same mist-covered gorge where Elias stood. It is a place where the mountain is doing its own work, regardless of the architect, and where the silence is as natural as the turning of the earth itself. Now, look into the landscape of your own mind, not to judge what you find, but to acknowledge it. Is there a list, a conversation, or a fear of an outcome that has been circling, a piece of your life that feels like a bridge you are afraid to step onto? Perhaps it is the need to be prepared, or the fear of standing exposed while others watch you cross, or a feeling that you must keep reinforcing the planks of your life before you can ever dare to walk. Do not push this feeling away. Do not try to solve it. Just notice that it is there, appearing in the quiet, like a heavy grey stone resting on the smooth surface of your awareness. You might imagine that you are holding this thought, this specific anxiety about your future, like the measuring line you have been using to inspect the integrity of your plans. Feel the weight of it in your mind. It might feel sharp or cold or demanding, but instead of trying to measure faster, instead of trying to force the calculations to be perfect before the mist rises, just hold the image of this thought for a moment with curiosity. Can you see how much energy you spend trying to keep up with an imaginary catastrophe, just so you don't have to face the space behind it? Can you feel the effort it takes to ensure that no one, not even you, sees the parts of your life that are currently unengineered? Now, imagine resting that line. Imagine the feeling of the cord going slack against your palm as you lay it down on the damp, cool stone of the ledge. You are not giving up your agency. You are simply stepping out of the inspector's role. With a slow, steady breath, visualize yourself choosing to stand, not to work, but to witness. Watch as the mists in the gorge swirl, slow and inevitable, independent of your design. Notice how the space they occupy is no longer a liability, but is now filled with the possibility of the moment. You are the one who breathes, not the one who calculates. And as you watch, notice if the tension in your own chest begins to dissipate, just as the mountain feels quieter when the need to prevent the future is called to a halt. It isn't vanishing, it is simply returning to the rhythm of the night, becoming part of the natural movement of the world rather than a restriction on your spirit. There is no need to force this image. If your mind wanders, if you find yourself back in the habit of tracking your own perceived vulnerabilities, that is perfectly fine. You are not failing. You are simply noticing the habit of the mind. Just gently, like the settling of dust, bring your awareness back to the sensation of your body resting. Bring your awareness back to the fact that you are safe in this room. The measuring line you have been carrying in your mind is lying beside you, ready for whenever you might need it, but for these hours it is not required. You don't have to check on the rivets. You don't have to keep account of the planks. You are free to let the night be, open and unmanaged, in the stillness. Perhaps you notice a feeling of resistance, A quiet voice saying that you should be more productive, that this isn't enough, that you should be reinforcing your safety before you sleep. If you hear that voice, don't argue with it. Don't fight it. Just recognize it as another thought, a tool you have grown accustomed to using. You can watch it too. You can let it rest on the desk. You are the one who lives in the architect's house, not the one who has to hold the mountain together for the world to see you. This is the practice of letting the crossing be. It is the practice of realizing that the parts of yourself you are most afraid to lose, the old preparations, the frantic need for a guarantee, the versions of yourself that you have been trying to force into a rigid design, are not things that need to be preserved at the cost of your peace. They are the past. They are what made you who you are. But they do not have to be the blueprints that dictate your worth. When you stop fighting the reality of your own vulnerability, when you stop trying to lacquer over your own natural texture, something inside you begins to rest. It is a profound, deep rest that only comes when you finally stop trying to engineer a life for an audience that isn't even watching. Continue to breathe in this way, long and slow. Feel the weight of your limbs. Feel the coolness of the sheets. If your mind feels busy, simply return to the feeling of your chest rising and falling, a rhythm as old as the mountain itself. You are becoming like the gorge, not static, but present. You are becoming more of who you truly are, and less of the architect who thought he had to hold the entire world in place with a single, fragile line of wood. There is nothing you need to accomplish tonight. The world will be there in the morning, and you will meet it in your own time, with a clearer eye and a lighter hand. But for now, the temple of your own heart is open. The gorge is quiet, and you are allowed, for the first time in a long time, to simply exist. Just notice the weight of your body, the quiet of the room, and the steady, unforced movement of your breath. Everything is exactly where it needs to be, and you are exactly who you need to be. There is a deep, quiet strength in this surrender, and it is here, waiting for you, whenever you decide to finally let the path reveal itself, unburdened by your need to have the bridge finished. As you linger in this space of release, notice how the very act of not planning creates a new kind of openness. You are not losing your capacity, you are finally letting it be what it is. A quiet, essential resilience that does not require a blueprint to be felt. The pressure that felt like a permanent fixture of your being is beginning to look more like the evening mist, something that was once thick and concealing, but is now simply thinning, revealing the stone beneath. You don't need to push the plans away. You don't need to sweep the dust clear. You only need to wait, breathing into the quiet, and let the presence of your own life do the work. In a moment, we will look toward a story of a monk who carried a satchel filled with iron ropes and dried roots, believing he needed them to survive the pilgrimage. And we will see what happened when he learned that the weight of his own preparation was the very thing that made him stumble. But for now, just drift. You are safe. You are held by the night, and you are allowed to stop trying to be the engineer of every outcome. The room can be dark, and the night will continue to move, and you, for these hours, are finally allowed to be nothing more than the one who is witnessing the world turn to silver in the moonlit quiet. In a valley known for its volatile weather, there lived a pilgrim named Koi. He was a man defined by his deep unspoken fear of being left helpless in the face of disaster. For years he had traveled across the mountain passes carrying a heavy, oversized leather satchel. It was filled with everything he believed he would need should the worst occur. Coils of iron-thick rope, bags of dried roots for medicinal poultices, flint for fire, and even extra soles for his sandals, stitched together in case his own wore thin. The satchel was immense, its straps digging deep into his shoulders, leaving calloused marks on his skin that never truly healed. He moved slowly, his head bowed, his eyes perpetually watching the ground for obstacles, his mind constantly rehearsing scenarios of collapse, broken bones, or sudden, freezing storms. He was so busy securing his survival that he had become a stranger to the beauty of the landscape he was trekking through. One afternoon, while ascending a narrow, shale-covered path, Koi encountered a fellow traveler who had slipped and tumbled from a small ledge. The man was trapped in a thicket of thorns, his leg clearly injured, his face pale with shock and pain. Koi dropped his heavy satchel with a thud that echoed against the canyon walls and rushed forward. He felt a surge of panicked efficiency. He was prepared for this. He reached into his leather bag, pulling out his iron ropes and medicinal herbs, his hands moving with the frantic automatic rhythm of a man who had practiced this moment 1,000 times in his thoughts. Yet, as he tried to navigate the steep, slippery incline to reach the injured man, the sheer weight of his own gear betrayed him. Every time he tried to scramble down to the thicket, the heavy satchel pulled him off balance, and the extra weight made his footing slide on the loose stone. He became agitated, his breath turning into short, sharp gasps. He tried to force his way down, his mind screaming that if he only had more tools, if he had only packed a longer rope or a sturdier bandage, he could fix this instantly. But the more he struggled, the more he slipped. He was not helping, he was becoming a hazard to himself and the man below. He paused, his chest heaving, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked down at his own trembling hands, then at the injured traveler, and finally at the mountain of gear he had brought to keep himself safe. He realized, with a sudden, jolting clarity, that the satchel was not a shield, it was an anchor. By preparing for every possible catastrophe, he had rendered himself unable to respond to the actual, unfolding tragedy right before his eyes. Koi closed his eyes for one long, deep moment. He didn't try to solve the problem with his tools. He simply breathed, letting the frantic, ego-driven need to be the prepared one settle. He realized that the injury below did not require his entire inventory, it required his focus, his balance, and his presence. He took the leather satchel and, with a motion that felt both terrifying and deeply liberating, he unhooked the straps and let it slide off his shoulders. It tumbled down the slope, coming to rest on a flat rock out of his way. Standing there, stripped of the extra weight, Koi felt a strange, terrifying lightness. He felt the cold air against his back. He felt the true strength of his own legs. He stepped toward the thicket, not as a master of gear, but as a person who was present. He knelt beside the injured man, his hands now moving with a steady, quiet deliberation. He didn't use the iron ropes, he used a simple, sturdy branch to create leverage, and he used his own cloak to shield the man from the wind. He worked with what was there in the moment, rather than what he had brought from the past. When the injured man was finally pulled to safety and set against a sheltered stone, Koi didn't rush to retrieve his gear. He sat on the damp earth beside the traveler, his own breath returning to a natural rhythm. He was exhausted, yes, but it was a different kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes from being fully used by the moment, rather than the kind that comes from carrying the weight of 1,000 imaginary disasters. As they sat in the gathering dusk, Koi looked back at his satchel lying on the rock below. He didn't feel a sudden, magical mastery of the world. He didn't stop being afraid of the mountain, and he didn't stop respecting the power of the storm. But he did feel a subtle, permanent shift in his heart. He realized that the suffering he had been carrying for years, the constant, grinding anxiety of the what-if, was not a protection at all. It was a refusal to trust his own capacity to walk through the fire when it actually arrived. He didn't throw the satchel into the abyss. He didn't pretend that he never needed tools again, but the next morning he left behind the iron ropes and the extra soles. He kept only what was necessary for the road he was currently on. He started walking again, and for the first time, he noticed the way the light hit the granite peaks and the way the wind felt on his unburdened skin. He was still a pilgrim, and the road was still steep, But he was no longer a person carrying a monument to his own fear. He was just a human being walking, step by step, into the uncertainty of a morning that was entirely his own. This is the transformation that awaits you, not in a grand, sudden arrival at perfection, but in these small, quiet shifts of perspective. Every time you catch yourself over-preparing, rehearsing a future conversation, building a mental case against a potential failure, or gripping the blueprints of your life so tightly that you cannot feel the ground, you are doing exactly what Koi did on that shale path. You are mistaking the weight of your fear for the substance of your protection. The transformation occurs when you realize that your capacity to meet life is not found in the satchel, but in the person who is doing the walking. You don't have to become magically unafraid to start living. You don't have to wait until you are certain the bridge will hold to start your journey across. The small act of noticing that you are gripping, the intentional breath before you react to a perceived crisis, the quiet choice to trust your own instincts over the rigid rules of your mental blueprints. These are the steps that change everything. You are building a new relationship with your own strength. It is a strength that is soft, flexible, and capable of adapting to the shifting mist of your actual, living reality. This is not a cold detachment from your goals or your responsibilities. It is a warm, spacious engagement. When you stop treating your life like a disaster waiting to happen, you start treating it like a journey worth taking. You begin to see that the uncertainty is not a wall, but a doorway. And the strength you need to pass through it is the very strength you have been using all along to carry the weight. Only now you are using it to move forward, to connect, and to witness the beauty of the path you are on. As you lie here, feel how your own shoulders might drop just a fraction further. Imagine the satchel of your what-ifs, your shoulds, and your must-haves resting on a rock nearby, not discarded, but set down. You are lighter than you realize. You are capable of much more than your fear has led you to believe. And the road ahead, though it remains hidden in the beautiful, shifting mists of tomorrow, is one you are perfectly equipped to walk, one steady breath at a time. The silence in the room is here to hold you, and the darkness is a gentle reminder that for tonight, the work of the architect is finished, and the journey of the traveler is invited to rest. The exhaustion you feel is not the result of the events in your life, but of the intricate, fragile architecture you have built to manage them. We spend so much of our energy trying to govern the unmanageable, as if we were lighthouse keepers trying to command the direction of the wind, rather than simply keeping the light burning. This is the mechanism of control. We believe that if we can just anticipate every outcome, rehearse every conversation, or judge every mistake with enough harshness, we might finally secure a future, free from the turbulence of the storm. But control is a brittle substitute for trust. It turns your inner world into a battlefield where you are both the commander and the conquered, constantly scrutinizing your own actions for signs of failure and treating the natural fluidity of life as a series of errors that must be corrected. When you look closely at this cycle, you see that you have been turning your pain into an identity because you are afraid of being seen as insufficient or of being caught unprepared. You start to define yourself by your struggles. You say, "I am a person who always worries," or "I am someone who cannot handle the unexpected," or "I am a person who must always be 5 steps ahead to be safe." By naming these patterns as the essence of who you are, you effectively cement the paper frame in your hands. You begin to defend these parts of yourself, because if you were to set the lantern down, you fear you would have no way to measure your own value. The fear of losing the familiar, anxious self is often stronger than the desire for the unfamiliar peace of simply flowing. The Buddha observed that there is a profound difference between the experiences life hands us, the change, the loss, the friction, and the way our minds amplify that experience through resistance. We call this the first and second wound. The first wound is the original feeling, the sting of a sharp word, the heaviness of a long day, the unexpected turn of the storm. This is simply the price of being a human being with a beating heart. But the second wound is the one we inflict upon ourselves by demanding that life be different than it is. It is the internal chorus that says, "I should not feel this way," or "I must have done something wrong to be struggling like this." This judgment, this refusal to accept the truth of our present emotional state, acts like a grinding stone. It keeps the original hurt alive, turning a momentary flicker of pain into a long, drawn-out endurance. Think of it as trying to hold a handful of rain in your palm, but instead of letting it slip through your fingers, you clench your fist and wonder why you are getting wet. You argue with the storm. You analyze why you reached into the rain. You blame yourself for being unable to hold it, and you worry that your inability to keep it captured is a sign of your weakness. All the while, you are still clenching your fist. The wisdom lies not in preventing the storm from flowing through your life, but in the simple, compassionate act of noticing, "I am trying to hold the rain," and then opening your hand. Peace is not the absence of the storm. Peace is the willingness to let it pass through your fingers without trying to own it. Many of us move through our days trying to rehearse the future as a way of keeping it under control. We play out scenes in our minds how we will respond to a difficult colleague, how we will explain ourselves if someone misunderstands us, how we will finally become the person we think we need to be. We treat these mental rehearsals as if they were actual preparation. In reality, they are just a way of living in a time that does not exist, and by doing so, we abandon the only place where true strength can be found, the present moment. We are so busy building paper lanterns for a future that has not arrived that we lose our footing on the path where we are currently standing. There is a deep psychological relief in realizing that you do not need to be the architect of your own destiny. You do not need to oversee the unfolding of your life with such frantic intensity. Buddhist insight teaches us that we are part of a much larger, unfolding process, the same process that allows the seasons to turn and the rain to nourish the soil. When you let go of the need for constant approval, when you stop trying to fix your inherent humanity through the lens of shame, you are not giving up. You are simply stepping out of the way. You are allowing the intelligence of your own existence to guide you, rather than the loud, frantic, and often misguided voice of your fear. Even the fear of uncertainty is something we can hold with more grace. We treat uncertainty as a void that must be filled with plans, but it is actually a space of possibility. It is the blank page where the story can actually be written, rather than just recited from a script you wrote years ago. When you stop treating every thought as a command, you begin to see that a thought is just a passing event, like a ripple on the surface of a pond. It has no substance. It has no power to define you unless you give it the power of your belief. You can look at an anxious thought and say, "I see you and I hear your concern, but I do not have to act on you." This is the beginning of a different relationship with your mind. You are moving from being a prisoner of your thoughts to being the witness of them. This witnessing is a form of deep, quiet compassion. It is the ability to say to yourself, "I am hurting, and that is okay. I do not need to be any different than I am in this moment." It is the act of looking at your own tired face, your own messy history, your own collection of flaws, and instead of trying to hide them behind a lantern, offering them the same kindness you would offer to a traveler who has lost their way. When you meet your own suffering with this kind of presence, the second wound begins to heal. The judgment softens, the resistance melts. And you find that underneath all the mapping and the clutching, there is a core of goodness that was never threatened by the movement of the storm. There is a subtle power in choosing to stop feeding the second wound. Every time you catch yourself spiraling into judgment, and choose instead to take a breath and notice, you are reclaiming your life. You are deciding that you no longer want to be an active participant in your own distress. This is not about becoming a saint or reaching some impossible state of enlightenment. It is about reclaiming the simplicity of being human. It is about realizing that your worthiness was never something to be earned through precision or planning, but was yours from the beginning, as natural as the breath in your lungs. And this is where the teaching begins to touch your own heart, for you are the navigator of your own inner life, and you have the power to stop pulling the paper frame so tightly that it tears. When you finally allow the rain to flow through your hands without demanding it stay dry, you find that the storm was never the enemy, it was the source of life. You were never in danger of vanishing. You were only in danger of forgetting that you knew how to be whole without a lantern. In the next part, we will see how to bring this realization into the small, mundane moments of your day, where the real practice lives, and how you can remain steady even when the current feels too strong to handle. But for now, just let this truth settle into the quiet of this room. You have spent so long carrying the weight of being the one who has it all lit up, and it has cost you your peace. But you can put the lantern down. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be exactly as you are. And that, in its own way, is the most courageous thing you can do. As the shadows grow longer and the house settles into the deep, rhythmic hum of the night, notice how the air around you is perfectly content to just be. The walls do not need to be anything other than walls. The floor does not need to justify its existence. And you, in the midst of this gentle, dark space, have the same permission. You have done enough for today. The mask is resting, the light is clear, and you are finally alone with your own breath. The transition from the windswept, storm-battered mountain gorge of the pilgrim's journey to the glow of your own quiet space is not a journey across a vast distance. It is a shift in the way you perceive the very air you breathe. You have spent your life meticulously crafting a heavy, iron-bound satchel to carry your survival, believing that if you were ever seen without your gear, the world would catch you off guard and leave you lost. You carry burden into the small, intimate corners of your modern life, in the flicker of a screen, when you wait for a text that confirms your relevance, in the silent, heavy hours when you replay a social mistake and wonder if you will ever be enough, or in the performative, polished smile you wear when you are feeling fractured inside. You are so accustomed to the reflexive need to secure your future, to ensure your bridges are over-engineered, to ensure your plans remain flawless, that you have forgotten how to simply stand in the dark and be real. Think of those moments when you are lying awake at night, the room silent, the world paused, and your mind begins to rehearse a conversation you had earlier, editing your words, punishing yourself for a perceived lack of poise. You feel the familiar, tightening grip of the architect who fears the gorge. You feel the pressure to figure it all out, to curate your story, to ensure that the ground remains beneath your feet. But what would happen if, in that exact moment, you recognize the clench of your own hand? What if you realized that the voice insisting you solve the riddle of your security before sleep is not your own, but the sound of your own fear trying to stop the night? When you feel the sudden, sharp itch to check your phone for external reassurance, or to scroll through the lives of others to measure whether you are behind in life, that is the perfect time to practice the art of letting the blueprints rest. You don't have to break your devices. You don't have to isolate yourself from the world. You only have to bring a moment of awareness to the act of clutching. Notice how your body reacts, the shallow, rapid breath, the tension in the space between your brows, the way you pull your energy inward to protect the plan. That is the feeling of the pilgrim bracing against the shale. And in that moment, you can offer yourself a small, quiet act of grace. Take one breath, just one, Let the air leave your body fully. Do not try to change the situation, and do not judge your impulse to perform. Simply acknowledge that you are human, you are feeling a surge of insecurity, and you are choosing, for this one breath, to be present with it rather than run from it. It is a radical act of wisdom to decide that not every thought deserves your obedience. We live in a culture that tells us if we perceive a flaw, it must be fixed. If we feel a tremor of social anxiety, it must be silenced. But thoughts are just flickers of energy passing through the vast, open space of your consciousness. You do not have to chase every flicker. You do not have to dim the world to feel safe. The safety you seek is already there, residing in the truth of your own being. Even when the wind is high, when you feel the weight of needing to be composed or successful or together, notice the underlying belief. The belief that your worth is tied to how well you can keep the bridge from swaying. But you are not an architect, and you are not a performance. You are the traveler itself, and that warmth does not need to be housed in a fragile, rigid plan to be true. This is the practical application of the hermit's lesson in the mist. You do not have to stop moving toward your ambitions, your relationships, or your community. But you can stop trying to protect your future with white-knuckled desperation. You can allow for the cracks in the stone. You can allow for the moments where the plan falters. When you feel the urge to hide your vulnerability, to smile while you feel heavy, to pretend you are fine when you are reaching your limit, try a small act of transparency. You don't have to announce your struggles to the world, but perhaps you can stop apologizing for your humanness to yourself. If you are tired, let yourself be tired. If you are uncertain, let yourself be uncertain. There is a deep, resonant strength in admitting to yourself that you are doing your best. That is not a surrender of your dignity, that is the reclamation of your life. Consider the moments when you are comparing yourself to others, seeing their polished, curated versions of life, and measuring them against your own messy, internal reality. This is another way of trying to hide the fact that you are evolving. But remember that you only ever see the surface of their bridge, and they only see the surface of yours. The struggle, the exhaustion, the quiet, middle-of-the-night questioning, that is the universal human flow. When you catch yourself in the comparison trap, notice the tightening. Notice the desire to hide your face behind the satchel, and then intentionally, consciously, let that desire be. Don't fight it, don't even try to fix it. Just observe the impulse as if it were a shadow moving across the floor. You are the one watching the shadow. You are not the shadow. You can care deeply about your future, your work, and the people you love without needing to hold them with a grip that leaves no room for grace. Fear is a poor navigator. It keeps the architect scanning for cracks in every stone. But awareness, open, spacious, compassionate awareness, allows the journey to exist without the need for constant maintenance. It allows you to move through your day with a steadiness that is not based on the perfection of your facade, but on the quiet, unshakable trust that your history, your flaws, and your current state are the very elements that carry you toward your next unfolding. You are doing the work of a lifetime by learning how to sit with yourself, and that work does not require a grand transformation. It requires only the willingness to stay present, to keep returning to the breath, and to keep opening your hand whenever you find it clenched around a ghost. As you move through your week, try to find one anchor. It might be the sensation of your feet on the ground, or the feeling of the air on your face, or the simple, rhythmic act of washing your hands. When the noise of the world gets too loud, or the urge to project perfection feels too strong, return to that anchor. Feel the reality of your body in the present moment. That is where your life actually happens. Not in the rehearsed conversations of the past, and not in the terrifying projections of the future. Here, now, in the sensation of being alive. You have spent so much energy trying to be the architect who never misses a crack, and it has cost you your rest. but you can put the blueprints down. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be exactly as you are. And that, in its own way, is the most courageous thing you can do. As the shadows grow longer and the house settles into the deep, rhythmic hum of the night, notice how the air around you is perfectly content to just be. The walls do not need to be anything other than walls. The floor does not need to justify its existence. And you, in the midst of this gentle, dark space, have the same permission. You have done enough for today. The satchel is resting, the path is open, and you are finally alone with your own breath. The satchel that once demanded your constant vigilance, that heavy, leather-bound burden you spent so many years trying to keep perfectly packed for every conceivable disaster, has finally been set down in the quiet courtyard of your own heart. You are no longer required to carry your survival. For you have discovered that the strength you were protecting was never trapped inside a collection of iron ropes and dried roots. The mountain pass that once terrified you, the fear of being unprepared, the ache of not being strong enough, the desperate racing need to engineer a future that is immune to pain has been crossed, leaving behind only the cool, refreshing stillness of a night that asks for nothing. The bridge you felt you had to build, the planks you felt you had to reinforce, have been surrendered to the mist. And in that surrender, you have found a way forward that is far more beautiful than any design. You are no longer the architect in the workroom, frantically measuring your own safety against the crushing weight of the gorge. You are no longer the pilgrim shivering on the shale, mourning a weight that was never the source of your resilience. You are simply here, breathing in the deep, velvet dark, and that is a sanctuary that no surprise can touch and no uncertainty can shadow. The frantic pulse of the day has slowed to the rhythmic, unhurried pace of the earth. The weight that settled in your shoulders, that tension you carried through every list and every moment of apprehension, is dissolving into the soft, silent earth beneath your bed. Feel the way your body is being cradled by the night, supported by a stillness that has been waiting for you to stop measuring, waiting for you to stop calculating, waiting for you to finally, truly arrive at the place where you began. This is the grace of the unburdened traveler. You are not a project to be finished. You are not a structure to be fortified. You are a living, breathing, unfolding truth, and you are entirely perfectly free to simply be, without the constant labor of anticipation. Let your thoughts, which have been like birds circling a gorge without finding a place to land, finally settle into the grass. Let them fold their wings. They have no more work to do tonight. The scenarios that felt so vital, the anxieties that felt so pressing, the preparations that felt so essential, they can all drift away like the mist caught in a breeze. You do not need to carry them, and you do not need to solve them. The morning will come, and it will be new, but that is a lifetime away. For now, there is only the slow, quiet expansion of your own breathing. Feel the way the air in the room seems to hum with a gentle, protective peace. The moonlight, silver and thin, brushes against your skin like a quiet, comforting hand, asking for nothing, promising only the rest that you have earned by simply surviving the day. Your limbs are heavy, sinking into the depth of the mattress, anchored by the truth that you are safe in this moment. The constant, gnawing need for certainty, that ghost that has whispered in your ear for so long, found no purchase in the deep, dark silence of this room. You are not empty because you have let go of the satchel. You are finally spacious, a vessel for the only thing that truly matters, which is the quiet, essential resilience of your own existence. The silence is not a void. It is a presence. It is the same silence that sat with the architect on the ledge, and the same silence that sat with the pilgrim in the dusk. It is the place where all things return to be made whole. You are part of this return. You are drifting into the current of a peace that does not depend on your preparedness. A peace that does not waver when the world is steep, and a peace that remains long after the blueprints of the day have been put away. There is nothing else to do. There is no other path to walk tonight. You are exactly where you are, and you are finally allowed to set down the weight of being the architect of your own survival. In the deepest parts of your mind, let the memory of the planning fade. Let the faces of the potential disasters dissolve into the gentle shadows of the room. Let the need for the perfect plan, the perfect path, and the perfect outcome wash away with the tide of your own steady breath. You are becoming as fluid as the mist, as rooted as the granite, and as open as the night sky. The work you have done tonight is not a task, it is an unveiling. It is the act of stepping off the ledge and realizing that the journey you were trying to control was the one thing you were never able to break. You are held, you are quiet, and you are enough, just as you are, in the depth of this beautiful, unburdened dark. Drift now, drifting deeper than the noise, deeper than the plans, deeper than the story of who you thought you had to be to stay safe. There is a calm here that recognizes no future, no past, and no blueprints. There is only the heartbeat of the world and the slow, quiet rhythm of your own soul finding its way back to the center of the path. Everything is falling away, leaving only the soft, endless, forgiving stillness. And if the path you have been trying to pave has been waiting all along for you to simply trust your own feet to walk it, what would it feel like to finally reach the other side of the gorge without looking back at the bridge?